video, but what we were told is our system probably does not support the video, so we don't have that at this point.
Apologies.
That's okay. Once we get through the discussion period, which will be about 30 to 40 minutes, then feel free to ask questions. You can go ahead throughout the whole time asking them in chat, and then we will open it up to some time for folks to ask questions after the presentation. All right. I think did I cover all the housekeeping?
I believe so. There's also going to be an audio portion at the end, and we're going to cover that later in the slides. So once we start talking about the Q&A, I'll go over the rules and structure. There's some people who were here in the last meeting, so just to clarify, we're making sure to give you access to audio so we don't have to go through as many steps this time, and you'll see that once we get to that section, what we've done.
All right, so ready to move on?
Mm-hmm.
So welcome to the Clean and Renewable Energy Action Plan Town Hall meeting. By way of introduction, I'm Mike Wharton, with the Sustainability Officer for the Athens-Clarke County Unified Government. Also joining me is Maggie Songster. She's our guru on getting this WebEx meeting up and going. She's our Energy and Conservation Specialist with the Sustainability Office. We really appreciate the time you're investing and the effort that you're the time you're sharing with this effort, and for being here today. Some other folks you'll see on the call include members from the South Face Institute and Greenlink Analytics. These partners will introduce themselves shortly, and they will go into more detail about the planning effort. So at today's meeting, we are also being joined by members of the Community Advisory Board, Tom Lawrence. The Community Advisory Board is made up of community members appointed by Mayor Gertz to help inform and advise in the development of the plan and the implementation of the plan. CAB members are sharing their expertise from a variety of perspectives that include, and this CAB includes representatives from 100% Athens, Action Inc., Georgia Green Building Council, Athens Housing Authority, Athens Area Home Builders Association, the Athens Land Trust, the Athens Technical College, East Athens Development Corporation, Northeast Georgia Building Council, and W&A Engineering. We also have several representatives from Athens-Clarke County and various departments to assist in this effort as well. So next slide. Starting with the passage of 100% clean and renewable energy resolution in 2019 by the Mayor and Commission, the Athens-Clarke County government has been committed to helping move the community toward a cleaner and healthier energy future. This includes moving the government-owned and operated facilities to cleaner renewable energy by 2035 and helping the Athens community make that transition by 2050. But government can't do it alone. Your voice, your thoughts, and your active engagement are critical. This effort is going to take each and every one of us. So your voice and your participation will not only help shape the plan to come, but really is essential in the transformational change if we're ever going to make it happen. So a little bit about sustainability. Sustainability Offices was created, one more back, Maggie. You're one ahead.
Sorry.
It's all right. A little bit about the Sustainability Office. It was created in 2019. The office brings together social, economic, and ecological resources to foster long-term sustainability. We're involved in strategic planning and master planning. We provide a lot of technical information, resources, restoration workdays, and educational events and programs. We also provide a lot of educational materials and resources. Next slide. Some of the major areas that the office is currently involved in is energy. You can see some examples here. We have initiated several solar and clean fuels projects, methane recapture at the landfill, the solar array out, that's the lower left-hand side, is a solar array that was put out at the Cedar Creek Reclamation area. Some of our buildings, fire stations, rec centers, public works buildings were all solarized over the last 3 years. We're also working on fleet transformation and efficiency in building and the built environment. And the last area we look at is green infrastructure to address energy and energy needs. So the next one, another major factor that focus of the is ecological resource management. The examples here include habitat restoration, native planting, invasive plant removal, biodiversity enhancement, and ecosystem services. And you can see some of these activities that were done here where we're removing invasive plants and planting back with native plants to help improve those ecosystem services. We also are involved in evaluation and uh, location and acquisition of green space. The lower left hand is the latest acquisition for Athens-Clarke County. It was a 71-acre acquisition at Rock and Shoals. It's the largest outcrop area in Athens. It has 4 state-listed species and is really a jewel for Athens-Clarke County. We don't stop with energy or resource conservation. We also have other things that we're doing. Next slide. We're working on water conservation, aquatic ecosystems with flooding, floodplains, management, trash pollution, and food availability. And some of this is you can see in the lower left hand is, for example, a trash trap that we have as a pilot project, and in cooperation with several groups in the community and in the state. We're trapping trash as it goes through the stream, analyzing it. UGA is analyzing to see where it's sourced and trying to get a better handle on how our ecosystems are functioning, especially as large amounts of plastic are moving through it. We have some work days. The bus in the upper right hand is a diesel hybrid bus, which Athens-Clarke County recently has. And then you can see the methane gas recapture at the landfill in the lower right. So the goals for today's town hall, next slide. We're going to share Athens-Clarke County clean energy goals. We're going to answer some questions, but we also, more importantly, are going to listen as you share your thoughts, ideas, and concerns. So next slide. As we move through the rest of the meeting, please keep these questions in mind. They are intended to help prompt discussion, but the most important outcome of today's meeting is that we want to be able to hear from you. Your voice matters, and what you share now and into the future will help guide and transform the community as we move toward a more sustainable and healthier future. And these are just to get you started. If you have other things that you'd like to share, please don't hesitate, because that's what today is about, is hearing what you have to say. So with that, and the next slide, I'm going to turn it over to Megan O'Neill from South Face Institute to go through the agenda. And again, thank you for being here this evening, and thank you for helping shape the future of Athens. Megan?
Thanks, Mike. I'll begin just with a quick introduction of myself. My name is Megan O'Neill. I am the Program Manager for Policy and Sustainability Services at South Face Institute in Atlanta, Georgia. We are a 501c3 nonprofit that's been around since the late 70s. We work to advance sustainability and clean energy in this intersection between the natural and built environments. I'm joined today by my colleague, Erin Gallagher, who will be helping facilitate our question and answer portion later on today. And I'll be one of 2 speakers that you have in terms of contents, joined by Ye Rongji from Greenlink Analytics. We've been brought on to help support Mike's team in the development of the Clean Energy Plan, and we're really excited to touch on it with you today. I'll just lead off by saying there is no plan yet at this time. We are developing it, and we want to make sure that this is a community-focused plan that's made by the community. So we're excited to hear from you today once we dig into our question and answer period. And feel free, if you have questions in the interim, you can go ahead and drop them in the chat box. We likely won't get to them until we get to the more formal period, but feel free to drop them in as they strike you so that we can go back and pull them out when we open things up for further discussion later. All right, so first we'll kick off with Athens's commitment and the background behind that. So thank you, Maggie. So there are 2 separate goals that Athens-Clarke County has set for a transition to a 100% clean, renewable energy future. The first goal is laid out on this slide, and it applies to Athens-Clarke County Unified Government. So that refers to all the properties that it owns and manages, which is a very broad assortment of assets, including City Hall, water treatment plants, government office buildings, and facilities in public safety, so police precincts, fire stations, and more. And by the year 2035, the county is going to obtain 100% of its energy needs from clean and renewable sources produced on or for Athens-Clarke County Unified Government property. And by the year 2050, Athens-Clarke County Unified Government will decrease the use of third-party renewable energy certificates to not more than 40% of its total energy portfolio. The second goal that's going to feed into this Clean Renewable Energy Action Plan is on the next slide, and applies community-wide. And when I say community-wide, I mean everywhere in Athens-Clarke County. So by the year 2035, the target is to obtain 100% of electricity needs from clean and renewable sources, and by 2050, to have all other energy needs be met by 100% clean and renewable energy sources. So next slide. When we use the term clean and renewable energy sources, we're talking about sources of energy that do not emit greenhouse gas emissions and that can be replenished in a human timescale. So the current definition that Athens-Clarke County has established to satisfy these terms covers energy efficiency, solar power, wind power, hydropower, energy storage, which is also referred to as battery storage, and renewable energy credits. And not included within this definition at this time are nuclear power, biomass, natural gas, and coal. These are targets that have been set in the present time and a definition that was established based on current conditions and energy sources. Obviously, this is a goal that looks out forward to 2035 and 2050. And there's a possibility that in the years to come, other sources of energy and technology may become more scalable and practicable solutions for the county. And those will continue to be reassessed over time. And if changes need to be made to these definitions, they'll be discussed and addressed by the county. Next slide. So this has been a long time coming in terms of setting this commitment. And it really began with the community, with 100% Athens leading the way through a grassroots movement to host forums on environmental issues, film series on equity and transition, and then really having the government take charge and embark on setting a formal target through county commission resolution. On the next slide, you can see that the resolution that Athens-Clarke County set out for itself is a bit unique among cities that have set these targets and counties that have set these targets, in that it really emphasizes the need for this to be an equitable clean energy transition. And I'm just going to read some language from the legislation itself that's going to just kind of highlight the goals and objectives that we want to achieve through this transition. So one is that these efforts will work in a manner to redress historical inequities in our community by prioritizing resources to train and hire people from within marginalized communities to participate in the energy efficiency and renewable energy workforce. Next slide. And a few other excerpts, which I won't read each and every one of them, but just targeting into some of the other stakeholders that are desired to be engaged throughout this process, are inviting partnerships with utilities, institutional partners, industry, business, and individuals, as well as collaborating with communities, as well as flexibility to revisit these goals and associated planning efforts as technologies, policies, and economic feasibility of these commitments change, and continuing to reevaluate the role that fossil fuels play in ACC governments, employees' retirement funds, continuing to review fossil fuel divestment strategies. So next slide. So the road to 100, and by this I mean the road to setting this 100% clean energy plan and teeing the county up for success in implementing it. So first off was adopting legislation to make this commitment and establish the targets of 2035 and 2050 to reach these goals. In 2020, a SPLOST was ratified by voters to open up $15.8 million for energy efficiency and renewable energy projects in the county. And actually, that's the SPLOST 2020, but it was enacted in the year 2019. Forgive me for that flub. Then in 2020, the Community Energy Fund was established, which utilizes county revenue from energy utilities to help fund local clean energy projects in the community. And then in March of last year, planning efforts really got underway to develop the clean energy plan itself. And partners such as Southface and Greenlink were brought on board to help move things forward. So, next slide. So where are we now? And these dates refer to the year 2021. We kicked off the year by hosting a series of stakeholder charrettes on community and equity, intersection of natural and the built environment, and clean energy economy to help surface some issues and priorities that we need to take into account as we move forward with this planning effort. Beginning in March, we started business and community organization interviews, and now we are holding community-wide public town halls to continue to educate on the target and spread awareness, as well as continue to collect feedback from the community on what the local priorities are in establishing this target. Looking ahead, in the summer, we'll start developing the plan itself, continuing throughout summer and fall to iterate on the plan with continued input from the community advisory board that Mike described in his introduction. And then in November, publishing the plan, excuse me. And on the next slide, I'll dig a little deeper into this kind of junction between today and the summer, which is where we are right now in this process. So if you go to accgov.com/100, you can see on a landing page a lot of information on the background of this goal that's been set, as well as information on the community survey, which we strongly encourage you to take, as well as strongly encourage you to help distribute across the community, because we want to hear about community priorities, and this provides some opportunity for direct feedback. You can also on this site sign up for email updates to keep apprised of events and developments in the plan development process, as well as access some online resources that we've put up there to help educate and inform on what a clean renewable energy transition can look like. Next slide. All right, so why clean energy? Let's break it down. So energy is essential. When we talk about energy, we're talking about natural gas that's used for heating and cooking in our homes and businesses, electricity for lighting and electronics, and gasoline for driving our vehicles. Next slide. And where does Athens's electricity currently come from? So right now, electricity is produced through the burning of fossil fuels, such as coal and natural gas, or splitting atoms through nuclear power, solar panels, and hydropower. Next slide. And when we're talking about electricity, I just want to talk about how it feeds into the different goals that have been set. So electricity use in buildings and industrial properties accounts for a combined 48 plus 12, so 60% of all carbon emissions within Athens-Clarke County comes from energy use in buildings. And so that's why the 2035 goal for achieving 100% clean electricity was set, with this 2050 goal really feeding in from this 40% transportation emissions factor. And when we talk about reducing transportation emissions, we're talking about things like converting vehicles to electric vehicles or other alternative fuels, as well as identifying alternate forms of transportation that might become more feasible in the years to come. Next slide. So Athens currently has 4 separate electricity providers, and you can see on this map here that there's a lot of intersection, overlap. I'll say most local jurisdictions do not have this many active electricity utilities operating, but in Athens you have Jackson EMC, Walton EMC, Rail EMC, and Georgia Power, meaning that there's going to be quite a few stakeholders involved in this process and the need for a lot of collaboration in the years to come. Next slide. So when we talk about sources of energy, they do have an impact. So examples of this are mountaintop removal for mining coal to power coal-powered power plants. That's quite a bit of alliteration there. And we're also talking about the impacts not just of burning coal at the power plant site, which leads to smoke and carbon emissions, But we're also talking about the environmental impacts of mountaintop removal or water quality runoff associated with mining, as well as water quality issues that might relate to power generation. And so these issues really affect across the life cycle of these energy sources. We'll go to the next slide. And these dirty energy sources result in real climate change impacts. So warming temperatures lead to increased risk of disease from mosquitoes carrying diseases that may not have been in Georgia in years past that are becoming more present, such as malaria, West Nile virus, Zika virus. We're talking about reduced work days from extreme temperatures. We're also talking about sea level rise. And while that might not be something that intuitively affects Athens, climate change and its impacts are going to lead to issues of climate migration and climate refugees. As areas along the coast become less tenable for people to live in, they are going to be moving inland. And extreme weather events such as hurricanes are leading to the same impacts. As you might remember from Hurricane Katrina several years ago, a lot of people from New Orleans moved up to Georgia and never left. So that's going to put increasing pressures on our local communities as they continue to change from the broader impacts of climate change across the country. And additionally, dirty energy sources and the poor air quality that it creates leads to public health impacts like increased cases of asthma, increased risk of heart disease, and other respiratory illness. So the next slide. So why clean energy? In addition to clean air, it creates local jobs. When you're talking about installing solar panels on a roof or making a building more energy efficient through installing weatherization or reinstalling an HVAC system, those are jobs that have to be done in Athens in your building. And so by definition, those are local. It also leads to improved public health through reduced pollution and improved air quality, as well as improved indoor air quality and occupant health, because a more energy efficient building tends to be a healthier building. And these improved buildings improve housing for both owners and renters, resulting in safer, more affordable and comfortable homes, as well as lower operation and maintenance costs, which can lead to increased housing satisfaction. Next slide. So what can we achieve through a clean energy transition? These side-by-side pie charts demonstrate more or less the energy mix for business as usual by 2035 if we change nothing in the current plans that are in place for where our energy comes from. And so under the business as usual scenario, 77% of all energy in Athens-Clarke County will still come from what we are not considering to be clean energy sources. So it would be coming from coal, gas, and nuclear. And 21% of energy would come from solar, and 2% would come from all other renewables. So basically, if we do nothing, we will move to more clean energy than we're currently at, but we're still only going to get 23% of the way by 2035, as opposed to 100% of the way. So if Athens were to do more or less literally everything that's within its power to control in terms of making buildings more energy efficient, maximizing solar potential locally, under current conditions, that can result in a very big impact going from the BAU, 23% clean energy, up to 61%. So that would be a combination of 40% energy efficiency, 20% solar, and 1% all other renewables. And they're still, at this point in time, would be 39% coal, gas, and nuclear. And that's just because of the sliver of our energy production and consumption that are not currently under our jurisdiction to regulate. That doesn't mean it's out of the question that this can happen. It just means that there's going to be a lot of cross collaboration between Athens-Clarke County and the other stakeholders that are associated with the decisions that are made around where our energy comes from. And that 39% can be offset through renewable energy credits if needed. So next slide. So now I'm going to hand things over to Yorong from the Greenlink group, who's going to do a deeper level breakdown on clean energy in Athens.
Hi, everyone. I'm Yorong, excited to be here today. Please feel free to call me Yo. I'm Director of Urban Initiatives with Greenlink Analytics. We are a 501c nonprofit based in Georgia as well that really looks at clean energy data analytics and equity analytics. So we're one of the partners here to take a look at what the energy future might look like for Athens-Clarke County. And today we're going to talk a little bit about what clean energy looks like in Athens. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So this is really looking at how much Georgia currently spends on energy sources. And this slide gives us a sense of how that energy is currently costing us. So about $23 billion is currently leaving Georgia to pay for the generation of energy. We actually don't have a lot of fossil fuels being developed in Georgia, so we're paying this amount of money to really import coal, natural gas, oil resources. To put that $23 billion in context, because it's such a large number, the entire annual state Georgia budget is about $27.5 billion. So we're spending close to the full Georgia state budget to actually buy energy from other places. So when you look at Athens specifically, this county spends about $500 million for energy. So that $500 million is leaving Athens to pay for fossil fuel energy sources. If we look at energy forecasts through 2035 of when this goal is, that number actually increases by another $100 million. So one of the benefits of a robust clean energy transition would actually be to keep more of that money local and really using energy efficiency to reduce the amount of energy used by folks in Athens-Clarke County and decreasing the overall amount of money spent on clean energy, and also using renewable energy to create solar and other clean options to actually help produce local jobs and keep that money from having to be spent on non-local fossil fuel sources. So if we can move to the next slide. Keeping this money local can mean lots of opportunities for job creation in clean energy here in Athens. There are a lot of job sectors that will likely see a robust growth as part of the clean energy investment in Athens. So clean energy jobs could include positions in HVAC, engineering, research, et cetera. Within Athens, Greenlink Analytics helped develop a model that actually looked specifically at the Athens economy to see how 100% clean energy transition could benefit the county. We ended up finding that clean energy could create almost 10,000 new jobs from now through 2035, which would be about the equivalent of adding a whole nother UGA workforce to Athens, which is pretty impressive. We also found that there are a lot of income impacts of what good green jobs could do for Athens, and it's about the equivalent of adding $600 in income per resident per year in 2035. So this really helps show that there are a lot of economic benefits to moving towards clean energy in Athens. It can also tie back into those goals of the resolution to improve equity in the outcomes for frontline communities, and really making sure that as we're building out opportunities for clean energy and clean energy careers, that we are developing good jobs and good careers and building wealth in these types of communities. If we could go to the next slide. There are a lot of really, really great local businesses and leaders stepping up to actually prioritize clean energy in Athens already. So Alternative Energy Southeast, AES, is an Athens-based solar and electric servicing company in Athens, and it was actually the installer for a recent Solarize Athens campaign, which is really awesome. Derick and Beer Company, which I'm sure many of you know and love, has actually installed solar on one of their buildings in Athens. This gorgeous solar array actually generates clean energy for them on site and offsets about 30% of their energy consumption, which is pretty impressive. And we have W&A Engineering, which is a local engineering firm that is actually a representative on our community advisory board. And they have recently completed the construction of a sustainable Earthcraft certified building, which also includes a solar array installed by AES. So lots of good partnership and clean energy generation happening within Athens. If we could go to the next slide. Another program that Athens already has going for it is Solarize. Solarize is actually a type of program that allows for the bulk purchase of solar installation materials and battery storage materials, and it actually helps decrease solar installation costs for local Athens residents. Athens has now had 2 solarize campaigns. The most recent one had over 300 participants, which is fantastic. And thanks to the success of those solarize programs, we actually had a solar array in Athens donated to Nushi Space, a nonprofit which dedicates resources and mental health support for local musicians, which is pretty awesome. We also have another example with the Athens Land Trust West Broad project. The Athens Land Trust is also a CAB member. It conducted energy audits, provided education, and implemented energy and water conservation and efficiency programs in homes in the historically Black West Broad neighborhood. This was actually a partnership between the Athens Land Trust and Athens-Clarke County government, and it involved the great participation of the Athens Land Trust Youth Urban Builders Youth Program, and it was funded by a grant from the Southeast Sustainability Directors Network. So this is a really good example of collaboration to actually bring resources together to do clean energy job creation, training, and really improving clean energy equity outcomes in the Athens community. If we could go to the next slide. Clean energy has a ton of positive health outcomes in addition to economic and job outcomes. So one example of that could be looking at energy efficiency. If you actually improve energy efficiency in local buildings, you can help them reduce environmental pollution, which therefore increases the health of indoor air quality and overall improves the health and wellness of the community. So by doing clean energy, you can have safer and more comfortable homes. You can lower maintenance costs in those homes. And overall, you can see public health savings of about $305 million through 2035 if we maximize the potential of clean energy in Athens. And overall, this will really help improve indoor air quality and occupant health of Athens-Clarke County residents. The Athens Wellbeing Project actually did a study that showed that 9% of the county report mold problems in the home, and that households reporting the presence of mold are 11.3% more likely to report asthma. So by focusing on clean energy, we can actually start addressing some of these more systemic health issues in the county as well. So if we could go to the next slide. Health is one component of energy equity, and we wanted to really make sure that we're actually centering equity in the context of energy. So there are a couple of components of energy equity. One is energy democracy. We really want to make sure that there is process equity in this, that we are including communities that have traditionally been excluded from clean energy conversations, that they are involved, they participate, and they're not excluded from this. It's really important to note when you're talking about energy equity that equality is not the same as equity. So when it comes to clean energy, no one size fits all. There is no one size fits all solution. We really need to be intentional about improving distributional equity to ensure that traditionally underserved communities get access to clean energy resources and actually receive the benefits of a clean energy transition. And we need to be really, really intentional about that. So improving energy equity can include multiple factors, such as increasing energy security for residents, by decreasing the number of utility shutoffs, et cetera, and reducing energy burden, which we'll dive a little bit more into in the next slide. So how we define energy burden in the context of this project is that energy burden is the percent of yearly income that residents pay for electricity and gas bills. So on average, across the country, most households actually pay about 3% of their average income to paying for their utility bills for gas and electricity. If you're paying 6% of your annual income, that's considered a high energy burden. If you're paying more than 10%, that's considered severe energy burden. So it's very, very high in that case. When you actually look at what energy burdens look like in Georgia, you find that the average Georgia household already starts paying about 5% of their annual income for paying for electricity and gas bills. This is pretty high. It's close to that 6% threshold already. But when you actually look at Athens-Clarke County in particular, we are above that 6% high threshold, like you are seeing heavy burdens for Athens-Clarke County residents on paying for utility bills. So one other point that I would like to make is that Athens-Clarke County residents actually include some of the highest electricity burdens across the state of Georgia. So I think there is a lot of room for improvement when it comes to this. So if we could go to the next slide. As far as impact goes, in addition to clean energy and why it might be important for people's wallets to address energy burden, there are a couple of additional impacts that it's worth noting. One is that a Department of Energy study found that 31% of Americans have actually gone without a medical prescription or a meal to actually pay for a bill, such as a utility bill. And this type of situation has only been exacerbated by COVID-19. Another reason why we really need to care about energy burdens and utility bills is that they are the #1 reason why people take out short-term loans. So when you think about predatory lending and long-term debt, this could have a major impact as well. So if we could go to the next slide. There are actually really great ways to help tackling energy burden and what does that mean for communities. So one of the things that homeowners and residents can do to decrease their energy burdens and improve energy efficiency and really help us transition to this 100% clean energy goal is by doing energy efficiency. There are actually a lot of low-cost measures that you can do to improve energy efficiency, filling up leaks, improving insulation, many other options. A lot of that goes along with weatherization, and you can even go further to do deep retrofits in a home or apartment to actually see many reductions in energy usage. And with aggressive reductions, you can actually save up to 30 to 40% of your energy use. So you can really see that a clean energy transition with energy efficiency, as well as solar and other potential clean energy options, can actually provide a lot of benefits for Athens and Clarke County residences and businesses. You can start reducing the energy burden for residents, help people save money on bills. You can create jobs and stimulate the local economy. You can improve air quality and public health, and you can improve buildings and increase home comfort. So there's a lot of exciting reasons to actually move towards 100% clean energy. I'm going to pass this back to Megan.
All right. Thank you, Yo. So actually, I think at this point, we're going to move into our Q&A, and Maggie is going to walk us through on the next slide just some logistics around making sure we get all the audio and the chat functions working properly. So Maggie?
Let me just unmute myself there. Thank you guys for coming and participating in this meeting. This is the segment to where it's most important, where we're trying to hear input from y'all and make sure that your voices are heard. So in order to make this platform as easy as possible, what we've already done is that we've granted you access to have audio, even though film is not here, so we can't exactly see your video. But after doing that, right next to your stop audio broadcast button, there should be a connect audio. Once you do that, I will unmute you, and then you have control over whether you can mute or unmute yourself. I see that there's one person who hasn't quite connected audio yet, so if you want to reach out to me, if you're having technical difficulties, let me know. Oh, okay, you got it, great. So from there, we're going to try and keep this as organized as possible. So if you, there should also be an option to raise your hand as well. And so if you guys could raise your hand to see who can speak first, that would be greatly appreciated. Or just like put in the chat saying, I'd like to speak, can I go next? And so we'll move it forward from there. And I'll pass it on to who has questions. Okay. It seems like the first person is Johnny Kusama. So if you want to unmute yourself, we can begin. Hey, Johnny.
Okay, hi. I got several questions. One is, can you explain what the renewable energy credits that apply to our community are, that you're having a goal of 40% by 2035?
So sure, I can take that. So a renewable energy credit refers to essentially one analogy that's periodically used that may or may not be a good one is comparing it to indulgences in the Catholic Church, which is more or less buying your way out of sin. But when you're talking about renewable energy credits, it refers to essentially buying renewable energy offsets that might be produced elsewhere. So basically entering into a contractual arrangement with the producer of energy to claim credit for the energy they're producing through some sort of payment. So helping ensure that additional clean energy is put onto the grid, but it might be put onto the grid elsewhere in other locations. So it could be as close as 20 miles away from Athens, or it could potentially be in the Midwest, depending on the contractual arrangement. So because of the potential for RECs to not be local, they are not considered an ideal option because the preference would be to generate 100% clean local energy. But there are challenges associated with that, as we were laying out earlier. So renewable energy credits are being treated as a bit of a backup option and definitely lower priority than anything that can be done locally.
And what has been the collaborating response with the surrounding communities to the efforts that Athens-Clarke County is trying to develop and do by 2035?
I'll take some. Yeah, I think what if I understand the question right, kind of how are people responding back? And we've got the most, probably one of the most overwhelming answers is we need more education. We need to understand. We need to figure it out. It's all been positive. There's quite a bit of commitment. We see it in the businesses, local nonprofits. We also see it in the public. Of course, cost is a concern. Education is a need. Yeah, how do we even know what, as people have said, how do we even know what question to ask? So far we're getting a very good response back, because the end result is not only a cleaner and healthier environment, but we also see opportunities for people to save real money. So that there's several benefits, and we're hearing a lot of good stuff so far.
I think my question was geared more towards Oconee County, Jackson County, the surrounding counties, because if we don't get regional buy-in, then ACC could do a tremendous amount, but for a very small area. And I'm just curious to see if the surrounding county governments are even interested in joining into this process, or if they're already actively involved.
I don't know that there hasn't been any regional outreach that I know of. By setting, I should say, from the ones that are closest to us, there are several cities in Georgia. I think we were number 5 on actually pushing forward with the goals outlined in the resolution. There are some individual actions within those counties. A lot of those may be driven by industry and by the power producers. Building solar arrays is occurring. A big one, I believe, in Oglethorpe County. Jackson County has several industries that have gone solar. So it's one of those things that will start moving forward as people set examples, and that's part of where we are right now. We're establishing what Athens-Clarke County's goals are, and as we set that example and move forward, we will be reaching out and trying to help others also move forward.
Thank you.
Okay, it seems like Tom also has a comment as well. So Tom, if you want to unmute yourself.
Sure. I just did that. And first one, I love the indulgences analogy. You know, I'm glad my mic was muted because I burst out laughing. I totally understand that one. And part because I've actually thought about that the same thing myself over the years. But anyway, you know, this is I mean, I'm on the advisory board, so you know, I get a chance to input a lot of times there. But one thing that struck me early on, we're talking about battery storage as being part of renewable. But if it depends upon what you're storing. If you're just charging it up from the grid, you're not getting it 100%. You know, if you do battery storage associated with a solar power system like I got on my house, that'd be different. You know, and was that difference recognized, or you know?
It indeed is. We are. You'll be happy to hear that we Athens-Clarke County has been is entering into an agreement shortly with Georgia Environmental Finance Authority to put in the first into the first government building a solar plus storage effort. So we recognize that that is a need. As you know, batteries are a challenge. The technology is rapidly changing, and as the price point and installation ability, the ability to install it becomes more and more feasible. I know in our project, we estimated the solar to be at right around 100,000, but then the battery, just to run about half the systems in the building that we targeted, was right around 130 or 140, that $100,000. So it's still, it's a tough price point for a lot of people, but you got to start somewhere. Large scale stuff is starting to get more and more affordable for people. So yes, we recognize that solar all by itself is not going to achieve the goal. We need to have it needs to be followed by that storage, and we do see that market change.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I did the same math, economics math myself, and decided not to put a storage for a house scale. It's hard to justify, but also, in terms of battery storage, also does a lot for demand, and that's doesn't necessarily make it 100% renewable, but it does do a lot to spread the load out on the grid. So it's a good thing. I really support that.
And we do see some of the power providers, they are putting in battery storage. They've started moving that direction. What's interesting is they were taking old leaf, the old leaf batteries and putting them in essentially boxes and linking them, daisy chaining them together. So I thought that was a pretty ingenious way to reuse something.
Yeah, I saw an article on that too myself a week or two ago. I thought that's great. Anyway, that's my 2 bits.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
And I think Broderick had a question. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Maggie.
I was about to say the same thing.
So I guess that one falls back to me too. Broderick, you hit on one of our challenges. Part of the challenge is finding, as you know, when you try to move forward with green jobs, is you have to have the capacity inside our community. If we want to keep it local, you have to have the capacity to attain that. So we have to have businesses here in Athens that have that capacity. But before businesses want to invest to create the capacity, we also have to have the demand. So part of what we're running into is kind of that early stage of this moving forward, where you have that push-pull situation of how do you create the service, how do you create the demand that creates the service that creates the demand. So we absolutely see that as part of this challenge. We would, if you feel like that is something we should pay a special attention to, that is something we can note. That is one of the things we would put in our plan, for example, as an action step. For doing that. We do have some things we have done as local government on small scale, because we're at small scale right now. And one of the things we did is partner up with the Athens Land Trust Young Urban Builders Program, which takes young people, trains them in how to do weatherization within homes, and then have them work on a specific project. We have another program called the Athens Core, which is Athens Core. They're doing the same thing, not as focused on green right now, but we feel like that will start to transform as a in-house job training, workforce development program through our economic development unit out of the manager's office. So we definitely see those as challenges, and we definitely see those as a need in the future. That answered his question.
Broderick, do you have a response to that? Let's see.
Yes, hello, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Hey, yes, thanks for that question. Again, thanks for doing this platform. I'm really enjoying engaging in this way. But yeah, I've spoken to a couple of local, like with one of the committees I'm on. It's a subcommittee, I think, of 100% Athens. We're organizing to talk with providers in the area and outside the area. So far, we've got one person hired on. They started out at $17 an hour, but recently got a raise up to $20 an hour in the industry, in the solar industry, doing installs. And so we're trying to expand on that by having conversation with people like Cherry Street and others. But I mean, I just want to reiterate the importance of like focusing on a labor equity piece because like there are contracts that are coming up and being doled out and some that have already been done. And we keep talking about equity, and it sounds like we're using it in the right context within the conversation, yet we aren't seeing many action steps being put in place beyond the urban farm, young urban builders program, which I'm familiar with the program through the land trust. I've worked with land trust in the past, and it's a great program. It's an awesome program. But as a community, there are people that want opportunity, need opportunity, and so if you need help making that or addressing that issue. Please feel free to reach out. We have connections within the community. The other question I asked was, what are the other partners that y'all are working with right now? Because we're also trying to develop a literal pipeline with the school district. So far, we're in the beginning stages of conversation with that program, but we don't have much time. We're working with like a sense of urgency because the industry is going to be growing. Clarke County is going to be moving forward, and people aren't going to be trained yet. And so we're trying to get people, trained up so they can fulfill these contracts that are going to be coming out.
Broderick, have you reached out to Athens Tech yet at this point?
Yeah, we spoke to Athens Tech. Some of their programs have a few limitations as well, including funding. You have to have funding and people in those seats. But those programs are oftentimes long, and they have certain requirements that don't offer paid opportunities. Because one of the things that we're running into when we talk to actual people is that when you're in a training program and you have to go from 8 to 5 or 8 to 4, and you're not being paid the entire time, when you're in that 6-week program or 8-week program, however many weeks it is, that's an extra burden, and your bills are still piling up on top of that. So in terms of equity, we need to provide, pay for those people in those programs, while they're going through that process, so their bills don't fall so far behind, so that when they do start working, they can keep their bills up and then, have money to set aside.
And Broderick, if you want to send me your and Maggie, you'll see that our email at the end. Just send that your contact information through. We certainly want to continue the conversation. Those are things that Athens is interested in, and we, based on what you're saying and some feedback we've gotten as well, that certainly would be part of the action plan. Is how do we put that in? Begin to form that as how do we create that?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I would love to engage. All right, thank you.
So Stephanie, I see that you're next to speak, and then Johnny, I saw your question in the chat, and you're going to be in the queue. So I'm going to unmute you now, Stephanie.
Great, thank y'all. Thank you, Maggie, and thank y'all all for your presentation. It was very informative, and for being here and pushing on this platform. Yeah, I was just kind of, as Broderick asked his question, just wanting to kind of follow up and ask you guys if you were interested or willing to push for policy that would protect local workers. It's one thing to create new jobs, and it's another to create jobs that pay good wages and have benefits. And so, like, just to ask or to suggest that perhaps like policy advocacy or like support around protections for of good jobs fair wages and good benefits along with these jobs that are being created, I feel like are essential to creating that equity that we're speaking to, or to upholding and holding those businesses that will be coming in, or whatever contractors bid on projects, accountable to our standards as a community for how we want people to live with their jobs with dignity and respect. And so just to ask if y'all were thinking about policies around protecting workers, or where your level of support would be in advocating for any such policy. Thank y'all.
No, that's great. And the good news is that that is a high concern for our elected officials, and they're our bosses. We certainly personally have viewpoints that are supportive of that, but that's comes at a policy level. So as you know, with government, we can recommend and government passes. The good news is that our current commission has been a very valuable goal that they have, is to create that opportunity. So I think you'll see that come through both in the plan, but also in the execution of the plan.
And Stephanie, I might add too, we've had some people kind of come through here in the first meeting and talk about things along the lines of like, what's the future of, say, a green jobs pipeline? And so we're open to continuing conversations in that matter, because one of the things that like we want to come out of this meeting is like, who do we engage with on that level? What kind of community members do we speak to? What kind of barriers of access do they have? And what kind of needs do they, like, as like we look at the economy of this situation, what are those needs that people in Athens-Clarke County have? So if we can maybe set aside some time with you to where we could continue this conversation and really like have one-on-one more sessions as to what those policies would look like and what would benefit y'all most, then we are more than open to have that conversation too.
Okay,
And
great. Yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, Broderick, that would go with you too. So.
Yeah, and happy to be in those conversations and in more close partnership with y'all to see and kind of create like tangible plans for what that could look like, both as like a policy standpoint, and in just like outlining like more specifics to how like what building equity around this industry look like. So I appreciate y'all again for facilitating that space and then for creating the platform that we can then communicate on.
That's awesome. That's like exactly what we want. That makes me really happy. Okay. Next person, Johnny, I noticed that you also had a question in the chat as well, so I'm going to unmute you right now.
Okay, well, I had a couple questions. One was Solarize Athens. When is the next campaign for private homeowners to participate in?
I cannot tell you that. We can research and try to find that out for you and get back with you when the next campaign would come.
Because I sure would like to see if it's feasible for myself, but also I'm a board member of our small HOA and would like to be able to promote that out.
And some of what's interesting about the way the state laws are. So when Megan was referring to the 39% of things we can't do, the state power laws are structured in a way that prevent, for example, you as a small HOA, you might want to band together and come up with a solar array or a microgrid for your community. Right. But you can't do that under Georgia law. You'd have to hire a third party to come in and work with the power providers to do that. Those are some things that we see long term having to be addressed if we're really going to move and make things more local, because those are things that make it harder to implement things at a local level.
I believe that's also true with the actual solar panels on people's homes, that you don't get a 1-for-1 back if you go over the amount, produce more than you need.
They have gotten better, and that has been a change. Megan, you and Aaron and y'all might know, it was the last year and a half that 2 years that they've changed that it used to be that they would buy it from you at wholesale and sell it to you at retail.
It depends, Mike. This is Tom. I'll interrupt you.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom. You know more than I do about that.
It depends upon who the power provider is. If you're Georgia Power, you do have the opportunity, like I do right now, where we're on monthly net. So I get some input from them, some I send out, and I pay on the difference. But if you're one of the EMCs, maybe not. They have their own rules that they set. So So
Jackson, we talked to them yesterday, and they do have a net metering program. I don't know what it takes to get on it, but they did mention that they had it.
yeah, I had to sign up within Georgia Power, and they have a limit on, you know, a certain number across the state, but you know, it's a pretty high number. So right now it seemed like it's still pretty open.
Yeah.
When I spoke to them last year, I got the distinct impression it was still, we'll sell it to you at market. Bottom line was anything overproduced was still being returned as the reduced rate.
Yeah, you have to actually sign up with them and reach out to them and sign an agreement with them to get them to do that. But the PSC is forcing them to do that, you know, so to have that program open. So maybe, I guess, try it again. You know, that only became effective July 1st last year, but they went retroactive back to January 1st. So for like 2 or 3 months, I had zero bill because I was working on a credit. So.
Now,
Okay.
interestingly enough, the Georgia Power is going before the PSC starting in January. So some of these concerns, one of the things that we want to be able to provide is education on how community members can input into the Public Service Commission, because that's where all the regulations are set or established, that and out of the legislature. But the most influence, you can have an influence at the PSC level, and that will start between January and July of next year.
Okay. Thank you again. Can you tell me who I was just speaking a moment ago regarding the use of Georgia Power? And
This is Tom Lawrence. I'll put my email in the chat if you want, and you can just reach out to me later on if you want.
that would be great. Thank you, Tom.
I live in St. Ives, but I'm on the UGA faculty, so you know I added my system about a year and a half ago.
All right. Excuse me. The Athens Land Trust West Broad, is that program been completed, and are there more projects lined up to help the underserved communities?
The project, COVID kind of wreaked havoc with the
Right.
West Broad project. There were two things that really kind of that slowed the project down. So the quick answer is no, they're not. They have gotten an extension to complete it. They are on track to complete it within the next, I want to say, the third quarter of this year. Two things that happened: one, COVID prevented people from getting into the houses.
Right.
Another big thing that they ran into was, and this is really a sticky question, is one that we've talked to the power providers about. We're looking at. There are houses out there among our most vulnerable who are not at a point where they're even capable of being weatherized because the condition of the home is too poor. So you can't go weatherize around a window when the windowsill is rotted out. That is it's going to be. We talked to the Georgia Power has a plan on how Action Inc. also has some activity in that area, but what they're running into the same thing is how do you weatherize a house that isn't even up to standards. So that is certainly something that we are wrestling with and trying to incorporate in the plan and to address.
Okay. Thank you.
And as to future, that was a pilot project through a grant. There are part of what the plan is helping shape is where we spend 15.8 million. So future possibilities are there to expand that program out.
And I think one of my other questions was, has there been any resistance within the business community or even the local community to the efforts that y'all are making?
Not so far. Of course,
Good.
you know, it's like anything else. I say that because once you start getting into the guts of the plan where there might be some combination of incentives and regulatory changes, I'm sure there will be those that raise that question. In the business community, many of them are already way ahead of the government. They've got some of those businesses out there have really done some pretty amazing things, and they'd love for us to all brag and give them a chance to to talk about it. I think honestly what it's going to boil down to is the question of how much is this going to cost me? I think that's going to be a pretty big driver for a lot of people.
Earlier, you mentioned about the different energy sources, and in 2035, you said we still account for like 39% from fossil fuels and nuclear. To me, nuclear, with all its current risks, is still kind of a green energy. Do we have any sense of how much of our energy comes from nuclear?
I honestly don't have that on the top of my head. Yo, did y'all in your stuff, did you have that broken out?
I believe we did. We can get that answer back to you in just 1 second. I'd have to look at the model.
Yeah.
And
the other aspect of my question was, and again, this is probably way beyond the scope of this group, but I've been reading a lot about the newer models of nuclear power plants that won't have the same risk, and wondering if there's been any discussion in this state about building that kind of a nuclear power plant, even as a prototype.
honestly, that's still at the, I've been kind of following the plasma, the news on the plasma and using that and fusion instead of fission. The fission part of it, yes, the energy that comes out of the fission plant is classified as clean, but the byproduct of that is significant, both in its long term. So that's where that comes in. Now, fusion, what you'll see in our plan is we're going to have a section on emerging technology that needs to be watched, and that's why the plan is not one that we're gonna do and sit on a shelf. I hate that. I hate doing a plan and just saying, "Oh, we did it," pat ourselves on the back and walk away. It's really going to be one we see evolving, and as these energy sources change, as alternatives come into being, then we need to be nimble enough to jump on them. I haven't heard anybody at the state level, primarily because, and there may be somebody else on the call who knows better than I, but I haven't heard it coming anything out of the lab yet. It's just still at the laboratory level.
Does that include the type of plant that Bill Gates has been trying to push for a prototype to get started? I know he got sidelined with what happened in Japan, but I had read that his ideas for the redesign of the nuclear power plant were a go.
And that's why we call it watchful, or a watch item. I really think that there's so much changing. Give you another, not to deflect to another area, but for example, take batteries. I was reading something last week on batteries being incorporated into the structure of what they call structural batteries, because instead of being dead weight, then they would provide structure. And I'm thinking, okay, that's great for a car, but what happens when that battery goes bad? Do you now have to replace a structural component of your car? So there are great ideas that are emerging, and I think what we just need to do is stay vigilant and ready. And as these things come out of the lab and get put into action, we need to be ready to take advantage of them.
I mean, Mike, this is Tom again. I'd just give you the kind of the engineer perspective of that point. Maybe in the 10 to 15 year time frame for the ACC part of that, I don't see a whole lot of different nuclear technologies getting adapted. I totally support small scale, but maybe by 2050 it might be. They're really literally one or two decades out still.
Okay, thank you.
From an economic standpoint, technology is pretty much there, but you got to have the companies that are producing it. You got to have the demand for the utilities want to have it, and you just don't see that right now.
Sorry to break in. I got the nuclear number for you if that helps. So currently the demand, the generation from nuclear is about 23.8% from nuclear of Athens' current mix.
Is that going up when 3 and 4 come online at Vogel?
Yes, it is. So I think, I believe based off of this baseline, if everything stays business as usual, we would see that increase to about 32.6%. So yeah, that number would be going up.
Correct. And on that on those side-by-side pie charts we provided with the business as usual projections, those both included the assumption that Vogtle 3 and 4 would come online on the dates currently slated for them to come online.
Maggie, you want to go ahead and switch to the slides with the questions on them? There we go. So here's these are some other questions that if you have some thoughts, we would, if you want to touch on these, we'd love to hear your answers.
And just in case anyone's joining by phone or can't see the screen particularly well, I'll go ahead and just read them off just in case, and feel free to jump or throw thoughts in the chat or chime in and speak. So the questions for consideration are just, what would you like to see prioritized in this plan? What clean energy resources should be used the most? What does success look like for you? How should we measure success? And how can we ensure that we are accountable to the visions and goals in this plan years from now?
So some of these questions are striking right to some of the questions that you had earlier, and they show that that is the information we're looking for. One of the things we will be sending to the folks who registered for the program, you'll get a copy of the slides afterwards, so you'll be able to look at these questions. We would love to have you send that information back to us. If you have time to think about it a little bit and shoot that back. You can also, we encourage everybody to take and pass along the link to the web survey, the survey that we have up on the web. It has some of these questions as well, and we'll get to that in the last slide a little bit later. But we encourage you to also take that survey and help. That's what's going to help formulate our priorities as we move forward with the plan. Okay, Johnny has another question about a preference for wind or solar. The difficulty with wind in Athens is, I believe the prevailing wind is less than average is less than 5 miles an hour, making it very difficult to create any kind of substantial wind generated energy. You can do some small scale stuff, and we've actually seen some wind wind turbines that operate pretty efficiently below 5 miles an hour, but not at a large scale. So that is one of the challenges with that. So solar is probably going to be the primary thing in Georgia, or at least up here. Now, coast is a different thing. I want to say that they're, I don't know if South Face or Greenlink, do I recall correctly that the governor has now opened the way for some wind farming off the coast? I thought there was a recent announcement on that. Maybe I'm thinking of somewhere else, but
I think you can probably speak better than I can to just the potential for wind and consideration on the Georgia power grid, at least.
For wind, I think solar has a massive advantage over wind, unfortunately, in Athens. Or it's not necessarily unfortunately. Unfortunately, it kind of just is what it is. But we definitely see a lot of potential for solar, really offsetting a lot of that fossil fuels. It's, I think if we pulled up that max case scenario, it's something like 40% of energy could be generated by solar if we made a major push and tried to do almost everything we could on solar. Unfortunately, that potential just isn't there for wind in Athens. As far as the governor ones, I could get back to you on that one. Give me 1 second.
But I do think that I think they have been looking at wind off the Georgia coast. So there are opportunities, and that's where the RECs come in. the idea behind those is by buying them, you are increasing renewable energy on the grid itself, even though it may come from North Georgia, Middle Georgia, or West, that you're still putting it on the grid. And in our case, what we really want to focus on as most we can is to get as much as we can here in Athens. If we can't get it in Athens, how close can we get? Because we feel like the closer to Athens things are, the more that is for our community.
Hey, Mike, this is Tom again. I actually had a student do a project about a year or two ago, looked at the potential for wind within Georgia. And, it's not that great, maybe up in the mountains area there's potential. And then, like you said, off the coast, definitely that's impossible. But look at our coastline is pretty small compared to
Yes.
Florida, or something like that. But, so I mean, in terms of the overall Georgia power grid, it might eventually have a small percentage, but it's not that great. And if you're looking for local with Athens, forget it.
Hey, Tom, if you think about it, shoot over the study. We always love seeing what the students are coming up with.
I'll look and see and dredge that up. It was like a couple years ago. So
Thank you. Any more questions? We've stunned you into silence.
I have a question regarding your questions here. You said, which clean energy resources should we use the most? So based on this previous conversation, what I'm hearing is solar, with the hope that in time we can develop better storage capability. So is there going to be, would you be thinking in terms of what success could look like? Is more people in their homes having solar panels, or that being incorporated into even people of lower income, maybe as a community thing, with a community-centered solar farm? Those are just some of my thoughts that might be put into there. I'm not sure how to answer that, but
But that's the direction that that is the information for the direction that we're seeking. So yeah, we do have, I mean, there are, when it comes to the fleet, especially larger vehicles, there are some options there like hydrogen, but they come with their own delivery questions and grid questions and connectivity questions. So yeah, what you're saying is helpful.
yeah, another thought that crossed my mind is there any consideration of using some of that 15.8 million in collaboration with, say, a program like Habitat for Humanity to help replace some of these homes that are currently you're unable to rehab them?
That is the information we're looking at from the community to share with us. If you see that as a priority, then we would like to have that in the plan. Is it possible? Yes. There are also several federal programs that we may be able to, as things change at the federal level, we're hoping to see opportunities there and to strengthen those partners, like Habitat, like Athens Land Trust, like Action Incorporated. Those are just a few of the organizations that are involved in that kind of addressing those vulnerable homeowners. So
I would definitely like to see that added in as simply from the viewpoint of equity. Again, we're talking not just you're still going to be leaving out a portion of our population because they don't even meet the minimum standards as it currently exists. So I'd like to see alternatives be available, potentially available even for a small percentage of these folks over time.
excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to add that we want to definitely see the labor aspects prioritized, but those will be ongoing conversations, as well. Like I said, we've talked to a few providers, like small scale providers, and we've talked about the profit margins and what they feel comfortable being able to pay people for labor, and most have been pretty agreeable so far. There are different um, like prevailing wage labor standards and other apprenticeship standards that they use in other communities. I'm currently trying to check and see, like, are they also right to work states where they have these things in place? But we're kind of like looking at other uh, policies in other areas that are already in existence and kind of pulling language and information from those different policies to strengthen what we have going on here in Athens. And so that's some of the stuff that I want to see prioritized in this work.
One thing I will mention, Athens-Clarke County does not have anything other than persuasion as a way of regulating University of Georgia. So I know that has been of concern to some folks, or at least of interest to folks. I shouldn't say concern. It's really been of interest to folks to work with UGA and see what can happen there. And certainly Athens-Clarke County is willing to engage on a wide range of topics with UGA. But there is that difference. They are their own entity, and they're a pretty big player in Athens. So that's just an upfront disclaimer, I guess. We will continue to do our part, and I think they're going to be moving in to do their part as well. Okay, any other input, thoughts, shared?
If I might add one more, I was just curious, you mentioned that this community has moved towards hybrid diesel run buses, and yet I believe the UGA has moved already straight on to electric buses. Is there a reason that, or what is the thinking on that in terms of for ACC?
Great question, because I asked that. That's a brilliant question, because I asked that same question myself. The difference between the UGA bus system and Athens-Clarke County is distance. So they had to look at runtime, how far they could get, so their trip, how long it would take to recharge. Could they do that given where they are now with their fleet and with their routes and the distances and the timing of their routes? And that was a huge difference. We think that will change. That's where technology just isn't quite there. They did go with some hydrogen buses as well. So they're looking at that. That tends to be the question, is that range. And as battery power gets to the point where you can go much further, that is going to begin to shift over. We can kind of see that happen. And we may be in an interim phase, or there may be a dual fuel outcome of this, where you do have hydrogen versus electricity. So yeah, that's a great question. I did ask it, but it's route. We run into this with a lot. For example, one of the businesses is a distributor, and they run their vehicles all the way to North Carolina. So the heavy vehicle industry is well behind the cars. So passenger vehicles you've got companies that are saying we're going to turn our whole passenger fleet over electrical by 2035. When you talk about semis and dump trucks and things like that, it's a little bit different kind of critter. But as batteries change, we'll see that. And it's also the length of time of investment. So you got a piece of equipment that can last anywhere from 15 to 20 years with some of these heavy, big equipment. So we are trying to, I really have appreciated that the hybrids and also some full electrics are under development for heavy, but that was the reason why. It was that length of trip was critical there.
Yeah, and the upfront costs are huge, and UGA was able to get it because we got a grant, to basically pay for the bulk of the cost, and that was just by luck, really.
And Tom, do you know, were they able to buy enough extra buses that they could have some on standby while others were charging up? Is that one of their strategies? I haven't talked to them.
They looked at the routes and the timing, and for the most part, I think, they'll put those buses on routes that they can go all day and then at night charge them up. And so the plan is they don't have to swap them out. And I think with ACC buses, that might be, it depends on the route. I mean, there's a lot of different route patterns on that point. Some of them go pretty far, some of them maybe not quite as much. And, so it would, my gut feel if ACC had to do that, they probably would have to have like you say, a swap out during the middle of the day, and have them stand by going on that. But I really think that's something that perhaps we have ACC Transportation talk to UGA, because some of the routes could make it work. But then we're talking about $500K for a bus too. So.
And just to kind of follow that up, I do know that our transportation guy has talked to UJ, and they're also talking to some other specialists who are focused on large scale transportation and clean energy as part of that. So we do see, the great thing about the exciting part of this is we're in a very fluctuating environment. The consternation of this is we're in an environment that fluctuates a lot, and there's still a lot to be determined and known. So it's a great time for change, but sometimes that's the frustrating part. All right, do we want to go to the next slide? Because we do want to be respectful of time, and we have come up on 3 o'clock. We can stay on a couple of minutes longer. You can see that we've gone through the agenda at this point. And Maggie, if you want to keep going, we'll go to the last slide. All right, we really appreciate everybody being here. We do have 3 more of these town hall meetings. They're going to be the same kind of format at the beginning, but the questions and answers might be completely different. You're welcome to tune in, and please pass along to others. We do want to know how you feel about this and the format that it was provided in. So you'll be given a post-event survey. We'll also send you some slides and the links to the upcoming town halls that we'd love for you to share. Part of it is not just what the information is, but this format, electronic format, and whether you felt like this was better. If you sat in on Thursday's meeting, we hope it's a big improvement over that. We felt like that was a little bit too much like sitting in the audience and listening instead of actually participating. So again, we really appreciate it. Complete the survey, pass the survey information along, and there are Maggie and my email information if you'd like to communicate with us. So if there's nothing else, I'll pause for a second to hear if there's anything else or anybody wants to add. You're muted.
That explains a lot. Thank you. I want to chime in one more thing. On our website, we have a whole page dedicated to this whole clean and renewable campaign as well. So if you guys would want more information as to like what's going on, or if you have more questions that came up during this meeting, we have an educational series that we've put up on there. So if you guys want to take the time to watch that, or if you ever have any more questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. Our emails are available just so that we can talk to you, and we want to continue engaging and having these questions.
All right. Well, on behalf of the teams, South Face, Greenlink, and Sustainability, and the CAB members, Tom, I'll speak for you. And thank you, Tom, for being here. But thank you all. We really greatly appreciate it. This is a beginning, not an ending. We do need your ongoing participation and feedback. We hope that we will continue to hear from you, because this is how we're going to make a change. So thank you very much for coming, and we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone.
You good, Maggie?